I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump is set to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea on the sidelines of a regional summit. Trump has warned of a 100% tariff on Chinese goods if Beijing fails to lift its restrictions on rare earth minerals. Now, Asian markets surged after the White House confirmed a planned meeting between Presidents Trump and Xi next week, sparking hopes of easing trade tensions between the world's two biggest economies. The rally came as a recent surge in oil prices stalled, following days of sharp gains after Washington slapped sanctions on two major Russian crude producers. Top economic officials from the US and China are in Kuala Lumpur for talks aimed at preventing a further escalation in their trade dispute. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will meet Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng ahead of next week's Trump-Xi summit. A Chinese national accused of trafficking fentanyl has been extradited from Cuba to the United States, with Mexico confirming it helped facilitate the transfer. The suspect, known as Brother Wang, had escaped house arrest in Mexico in July before being handed over to US authorities. China has launched a new communication technology test satellite from the Wancheng space launch in Pyongyang. The Long March 5 rocket successfully placed into orbit to test multi-band and high-speed communication systems. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has pledged that military brotherhood between Pyongyang and Moscow will advance non-stop, as reported by state media KCNA. He made the remarks at a ceremony in Russia's Kursk region honoring North Korean soldiers who fought alongside Russian troops, amid reports that more than 10,000 North Koreans have joined the war in Ukraine. US President Donald Trump has terminated all trade negotiations with Canada after calling a political ad featuring former President Ronald Reagan fraudulent. The ad, criticizing tariffs as job-killing, prompted Trump to accuse Ottawa of egregious behavior, according to his post on Truth Social. US President Donald Trump said Israel would not do anything in the West Bank after Israeli lawmakers moved bills towards annexing the occupied Palestinian territory. Speaking at the White House, Trump sought to downplay concerns over the legislation, telling reporters, "Don't worry about the West Bank." Now we start this hour with our top story. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt has confirmed that US President Donald Trump will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping next week as part of his trip to Asia. Leavitt has said that Trump will meet Xi in South Korea. Let's take a listen in to her statements.
On Wednesday morning local time, the president will fly to Busan, where he will participate in a bilateral meeting with the President of the Republic of Korea, deliver keynote remarks at the APEC CEO luncheon, and then participate in a U.S. APEC leaders working dinner. On Thursday morning local time, President Trump will participate in a bilateral meeting with President Xi of the People's Republic of China before departing to return home to Washington, D.C.
Meanwhile, China has confirmed that trade talks will be held between the United States and China in Malaysia starting on October the 24th. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng is set to meet US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer for the trade talks in Malaysia. US officials also said earlier that they would head to Malaysia to discuss Beijing's curbs on exports of rare earths with Chinese officials. These meetings come as tensions have flared between the two countries since Beijing expanded curbs on rare earths and other exports in response to a US hike in the number of firms barred from purchasing American technology. We're now joined by our guest, Andrew KP Lung. He's an independent Chinese strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Andrew, a hugely significant meeting. The two presidents of the two world's largest economies. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of that meeting? It's taken weeks to put together, apparently, but what is going to happen as soon as these two titans of the modern world meet next week in South Korea? I do apologize. I believe you might be muted.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you now,
What's
Andrew.
happening? Yes, I can, yes.
Oh, did you hear my question? I was just wondering, what is your expectations for when Donald Trump meet? What can we expect from their conversations? How do the two individuals get along? Of course, we've seen tensions between the two countries. Of course, the two world's largest economies boast larger-than-life characters at their helm. But how can we expect those two individuals, those being Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping, to interact with one another?
Well, of course, this is a contest not just between two individuals, but between two superpowers who have been rivaling each other for global leadership and dominance. And President Trump has been using all the arsenal under his charge in order to contain China's rise. I mean, that happens even during his first term. But now, during his second term, he's doubling down on everything, left, right, and center, using the tariffs, sledgehammer, restricting China's access to high-end chips, rallying Americans' traditional allies to contain China economically and also militarily, particularly in the South China Sea, and the so-called first island chain, centered in Okinawa, and the second island chain, centered in Guam, and with the port, with Australia, India, and Japan, and increasingly with South Korea and the Philippines. And of course, the China, unlike what China was, say, a decade ago, China has now become much more confident. It's not just a feeling, it is a long-term strategy, starting from President Trump's first term, because President Xi already foresaw what is coming, has directed the Chinese nation to double down on self-reliance on technology, and also pivoting to the global south in terms of trade. After all, China is the largest trading partner to 128 countries around the world, compared with only 58 for the United States. And of course, China is dominant in the global supply value chain for almost all products under the sun. Particularly, China has found a needle stranglehold on the rare earth, not so much in supply, because you can find rare earth other countries, including Australia and other countries, but the processes. So I think that with these arsenal, but on the other hand, China's economy is being hurt badly, and so it augurs well with some sort of accommodation with President Trump in the forthcoming meeting.
Andrew, of course, China is an outlier when it comes to these negotiations. When it came to the tariffs, we saw China meet with the United States in numerous European cities separately China did have weight when it came to the negotiating table. However, Donald Trump, of course, and his administration is outspoken when it comes to their opinion on Xi Jinping. He goes so far to call Xi Jinping a friend. The man, Xi Jinping, is a lot more reserved than Donald Trump. Do you think President Xi and his administration is going into this meeting with confidence in the fact that he can come back with some sort of deal, can put more confidence on Chinese investments and the overall Asian market?
Well, I think, of course, what Trump was relatively more for the time being is, of course, is the soybeans, because the soybeans, China has been the largest buyer of American soybeans, and of course, the Republican Party's many supporters are in those states in the United States producing soybeans and other agricultural products. And almost 80% of their soybean exports have been to China. But now, because of the trade war, China is now weaponizing this and buying all the soybeans from other countries. Now, bear in mind, soybeans is not like rare earths; it can be easily replaceable. So China is now buying all the soybeans from Brazil and also Russia. And that hurts the prospect of President Trump's midterm elections. And that's why he's very, very eager to find some sort of a deal. But what kind of a deal could he reach? And of course, President Xi doesn't want an all-out war. President Xi wants to have not only, definitely not a hot war for that matter, neither does President Trump, but also a more predictive and more quiet international environment to enable China to continue to grow its economy and to bring goodies on the table for its people. Now,
yes.
China's, of course, suffered most in terms of the American high-tech software, for example, and also restrictions on certain high-tech products. And of course, in general, because after all, China now had to import airplanes either from Airbus, which is now pivoting towards, or from Boeing. But I think that these the supply of passenger flight engines and also high-tech software could be exchanged for China easing some of the restrictions on rare.
Yes. Andrew, do stay with us. We have some further information coming out of the region. Asian markets have surged today following the White House's confirmation that President Donald Trump will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping next week at the APEC summit in South Korea. The announcement raised hopes of easing trade tensions between the two economic giants. Equities on Wall Street also surged, with all major indices finishing strong. In Asia, Tokyo led the charge, up over 1%, with gains seen in Hong Kong, Shanghai and Seoul. Tech stocks were among the top performance, boosted by Intel's strong earnings forecast. Meanwhile, oil prices saw a slight dip after significant gains earlier this week, sparked by US sanctions on Russian oil giants. The global market also reacted to news of China's efforts to boost domestic consumption and national security in the next 5 years. Traders are now awaiting US consumer price data, which is expected to have major implications for Federal Reserve policy. We are now joined by Gerard Alfil. He is an economist and he joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Gerard, for joining us here on the programme. It is a pleasure to have you. Gerard, your thoughts on the significance and of this Trump-Xi meeting and its driving force behind this surge that we have seen, not just in Asian markets, but on Wall Street as well?
Good morning, Thomas. Yes, As I said on Monday already here on this show, that I expect that talks will go on, that the negotiations will now go into the details. And that's what we are seeing next week in South Korea. As you mentioned, the 15th five-year plan in China was just implemented, chaired by Chairman Xi Jinping. In China, they call him the chairman. Outside, we call him the president, of course, always. And to me, this is all a point which China has scored this week. One news also which came out this week, which was interesting to me as a German, is that China has replaced again the US as the biggest trade partner of Germany. Germany is an export superpower. And this shows that whatever President Trump has done to put China at bay did not work out. On the contrary, all his measures, the more he tried to keep China at bay, the stronger China became. As Andrew mentioned, also through the Belt and Road Initiative, through integration of APEC, of the Asian economies. And this is, of course, what the investors at Wall Street, but also at Asian markets now reward. They see here talks go on. China has strengthened its position. And in relation to expectations to the meetings next week in South Korea, I would say there will not be a big deal. But I think some points will be settled in relation to tech, to chips, and so on. The Taiwan question, Taiwan as part of China, will definitely, I think, not be solved in a meeting in South Korea, but it's also a meeting of high symbolism. You mentioned Busan. Busan was in the Korean War in the early 1950s, the last beachhead which the US and its allies defended against in the Korean War. So this shows also the US wants to strengthen its ties to the allies, traditional allies in East Asia, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and elsewhere.
Also, Gerard, we have the news, of course, about oil prices sparked by these new sanctions by the US government on these Russian oil giants, of course, due to Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. They saw significant gains they saw a slight dip after significant gains earlier this week. Could you tell us about the crude market after these sanctions imposed by Washington?
The crude market, and that's what the IMF stated this week, is that there will be an increase in of the exporting oil countries, the Arab oil countries. Also, there will be an increase in production, but also the Gulf Arab markets are booming. And the oil price in Brent was touching $60 per barrel, which is 159 liters per barrel. So there was the danger that oil price would head towards a 5-year low. But now with Russia advancing all fronts, and Russia has gained more territory this year than in the entire war in the 2 years before, shows that there's also a bullish momentum in relation to commodity demand for commodity, that the boom, economic boom, the global boom, but also at financial markets is far from over yet. A lot of cheap money goes into the markets, and the expectation also that going back to the Trump tariffs will be easing because there are more prominent voices who criticize President Trump. Mike Pompeo, the former US Secretary of State, was here in Dubai this week speaking at the annual investment summit, and he said the Trump tariffs are bad for the US. They damage our growth. Mike Pompeo is no longer in office, as I said, but he's still a prominent voice, and he's a household name in the US. So I think this also shows that there will be easing of tariffs, which is good for growth and good for the demand of commodities such as crude oil.
Yes, Gerard, always a pleasure. Do stay with us. We have some more Chinese economics coming at you. The Commerce Minister, Wang Wentao, has said that China must promote the balanced development of imports and exports. He has stated that China must meet the needs of industrial transformation and upgrading along with the needs of people's lives. Wang has also vowed that China will create a more favorable environment to attract foreign investment in the next 5 years. This comes as a key gathering aimed at strengthening China's future policy priorities recently concluded in Beijing. We have some further news coming out of Beijing, where according to state media reports, Chinese state oil majors have suspended purchases of seaborne Russian oil after the United States imposed sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil Moscow's two biggest oil companies. The move comes as refiners in India are set to sharply cut their crude imports from Moscow to comply with the US sanctions imposed over the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. According to the reports, Chinese national oil companies PetroChina, Sinopec, Sinopec and Zhenhua Oil will refrain from dealing in seaborne Russian oil, at least in the short term, due to concern over sanctions. India and China are expected to turn to other supplies, pushing up prices for non-sanctioned oil from the Middle East, Africa and Latin America. We are now joined by Andrew K.P. Leung once again to discuss this. Andrew, let's discuss the purchase of Russian oil first. Of course, Donald Trump has been talking about this for months now. India and China, the two biggest purchasers of Russian oil in the world. Donald Trump says this fuels Vladimir Putin's war machine. Some would say that New Delhi and Beijing are conceding to Donald Trump with these actions. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I think there was a distinction in the eyes of China, in the eyes of Beijing, between China purchases of Russian oil and India. The thing is that China has always been well before the Ukraine war, for decades, been the largest importer of oil from around the world, the Middle East, Russia, because China is an energy deficit country and is relying on international purchases to fuel its economy. India has started by Russian oil only after, in a big way, after Ukraine was started. So
Andrew, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I believe we're having some network issues there. We have some further news. The US is preparing to launch an investigation into China's compliance with the trade agreements signed during President Donald Trump's first term. The Section 301 investigation could be announced very soon, and it may lead to further tariffs between US and China amid rising trade tensions ahead of a planned meeting next week between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trade frictions between the world's two largest economies have escalated in recent weeks after a period of relative calm. Trump has imposed additional 100% duties on Chinese imports set to take effect on November the 1st, 2025, following China's move to restrict exports of nearly all rare earth materials. We are once again joined by Gerard Alfil. Gerard, for those who don't know the significance of these rare earth materials, which Donald Trump is willing to impose a 100% tariff on Beijing, once again escalating this trade war, would you mind informing our audience of the importance of them?
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, there are 17 rare earths, but they are not rare in nature. They are called rare earths, but they are, of course, available in abundance in China in particular. And of course, there are unexplored rare earths of significance in Africa and elsewhere, which have to be still discovered. They are important for the AI industry, which is booming worldwide, which is revamping and which is redefining our daily lives in private and at work. They are also significant for the defense industry, and that's where we are getting here now in the crucial point in relation to defense, and both important for China and the US. And these rare earths are mostly not controlled or mostly overseen and explored by China. So that's why they are coming always into play. And there will be also, for sure, also a talking point next week between China's paramount leader Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump.
Yes, Gerard Alfil, thank you very much for joining us, and also thank you to our guest Andrew K.P. Leung. Pleasure to have you both on the programme. We now move on to some more news, where a Chinese citizen has been accused of trafficking fentanyl and has been extradited from Cuba to the United States, according to the Mexican government. The individual, identified as Xidong Zhang, also known by the alias Brother Wang, was arrested after allegedly being involved in large-scale fentanyl distribution networks. Mexican Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch has confirmed the transfer, revealing that Zhang had escaped house arrest in Mexico in July. He was subsequently captured and extradited into US custody with the assistance of Mexican authorities, who have played a pivotal role in facilitating the extradition process. Zhang's extradition has marked a significant development in the ongoing fight against international drug trafficking, particularly involving fentanyl, which has contributed to a growing opioid crisis in North America. Authorities are now working to bring him to trial in the United States, where he faces serious charges related to fentanyl distribution. China has successfully launched a new communication technology test satellite from the Wenchang Space Launch Site in Hainan Province. The satellite, aboard a Long March 5 rocket, lifted off at around 10:30 p.m. Beijing time and has since entered its planned orbit without any issues. The satellite will primarily be used for multi-band and high-speed communication technology validation, advancing China's capabilities in space-based communication systems. This mission marks a significant step in China's space exploration and satellite development efforts. The launch also marks the 602nd mission of the Long March rocket series, emphasizing China's growing experience and success in space missions. Now we move on once again. The Chinese Communist Party has named a veteran who has overseen anti-corruption efforts in the military to be the country's second highest ranking general, just days after 9 generals were expelled in a major purge. The appointment of Zhang Sen-min as second-ranked vice chairman of the Central Military Commission was announced at the end of a 4-day Central Committee meeting. Zhang becomes the 3rd highest official in the country's top military body after the first-ranked vice chairman and President Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, the Chinese Defense Ministry has stated that the 9 expelled generals were suspected of serious financial crimes. The removal of 9 generals has marked one